It's the return of the Hot Seat 2021 here on the UniTec Digital Media YouTube channel. We have a special guest today, the presiding commissioner of St. Francis County, Mr. Harold Gallaher. How are you? Thanks for coming to UniTec today,
You're welcome.
sir.
I'm glad to be on the hot seat, I think.
You think? Well,
I think, yeah.
You might reevaluate that at the end of this interview. We'll see.
Okay.
Okay, we'll start off with something real easy. When did you graduate from Bismarck High School?
65. That's 1965, not 1865.
Yes.
Right.
Okay. 1965.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Who were some of your favorite teachers at Bismarck? And list as many as you want.
Okay,
I'm sure you had some good
well, I
ones.
will pick the four men that really helped me in choosing a career and everything, and be the shop teacher, Jim Murphy, still alive, lives in Farmington.
Wow.
Dave Newcomb, our math teacher, Coach Lowry, Coach Hal Lowry, and then our counselor was Harvey Holloman, and they got me interested in math. Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you a quick story about our math teacher. My dad died when I was 14, and he died in the summer. And then first year of high school, when I first went into high school that year, Dave Newcomb, my math teacher, after a week or so, met me at the door as I was leaving the classroom at the end of the class, and he said, "Come to the airport after school today." He was a pilot, very good pilot, and at that time you obeyed your teacher. You didn't worry about what your parents said, you obeyed your teacher. So I did. I walked out to the airport, and he took me for my first ever airplane ride. And we were up quite a while, and before it was over I was flying the plane. He'd showed me the basic controls. With God's good graces, we didn't wind up in a hole in the middle of Bismarck with smoking and airplane parts laying around it, so we survived it. But the best part is the next day in class, Dave introduced me to all my peers in that classroom as his flying buddy that was a good pilot. And with a 14-year-old that had low self-esteem problems, I was the top of the class. And I promised myself that I'd be the best math class student I ever had. And I got close to that. So.
You got close to that? You weren't the best?
Yeah.
Who was the best?
He's old and dead by now. I don't remember who it was.
Okay.
But those other four teachers, the counselor showed me that I needed to go to Rolla. And I said, nobody in my class ever even talked about college, much less graduated. He said, "I'll get you going and all the permits and all the entry and all that." And he'd been looking at my grade scores and all that. But the interesting thing of that interview, I was standing out in my locker in the hallway that morning when he first talked to me. I felt somebody grab me by the shirt collar, and he turned around and said, "What do you want?" And he said, "Come with me, the counselor." And I'm following him to the classroom, and I'm thinking, I don't remember murdering anyone.
Today.
But yeah, it might be, that's what it must be. You know? But I went into his office, and he had my test scores all scattered out, and he said, "These told me that you could be a mechanical engineer, and you need to go to Rolla." And that's how that conversation started. And so they got me into that, so it worked out pretty well for me.
Fantastic.
And the other teachers did similar things for me too. So.
Absolutely. Who were some people in your class or like around your class at Bismarck that you still keep in touch with today?
Well, most of them are dead in my class, a high percentage of them. You know, this is, again, that was not 1865,
Right,
1965, but still a high percentage of them are gone. But some of my brother married the superintendent's daughter, and I still see all of her family. Excuse me. And a lot of those people, a lot of our classmates over there became very astute people. Different ages, but General Van Herk was one of our students.
Absolutely.
Dr. Don Van Herk, that this school knows pretty well, was one of our students. The man that invented the three-point farm hitch, the lift for tractors, was from Bismarck. He didn't patent it, but a man from Salem saw that, and he patented it before.
Really?
Yeah, and that was another Glenn Van Herk. That was the General Van Herk's uncle named Glenn, also named Glenn. We've had several very astute people from there. So Camille Neighbors, one of the board members from MAC, was in there. We've had a lot of people out of there.
Absolutely.
Very successful people.
Who's the most famous Bismarck High School graduate?
I think they're all in jail. I'm not sure about that. But I've named some of those people that are on the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, absolutely. What kind of vehicle did you drive in high school?
In high school, my family had a 58 Chevy, 1958 Chevy, and we had, at that time, we had the pipes out in front of the school with the cable hanging into it between them. And I backed Mom's Chevy into that one day, and when I took off, I felt a surge, and somebody, one of my apparent good friends, had hooked a small chain with a hook around that cable and around the back bumper of the Chevy.
Oh, no.
So when we sold that Chevy years later, it still had that little hump in the bumper. But I had that, and then when I went to college, I bought my first car, Volkswagen. Wore it out quickly, going back and forth to Rolla.
Sure.
But I was a Volkswagen fan for a while, and then I moved on up into high caliber cars that were at least 15 years old by the time I bought them, but anyway.
What did you wish was your ride in high school?
Oh, I still wanted a car that would run.
Yeah? It helps, doesn't it?
Yeah. But you learn how to fix them pretty quickly that way. Yeah.
What was your first job?
I was really the first convenience store, certainly in Bismarck and certainly maybe in the county, the Little Store.
The Little Store.
Now, I'll tell you something. When you get a telephone listing, don't tell them the Little Store, because it's filed under T alphabetically. So to find the Little Store, you had to go to T to find the number, not L for
Not
little.
L.
So I've learned that lesson in my whole career of writing ads and stuff.
Yeah.
So it's one of those early lessons. But I was taking care of the candy counter and all that, and taking orders in the back. They had a hamburger joint back here. That was a couple of years. I made 60 cents an hour, worked 30 hours a week after school. That's $18 a week in cash.
Right.
I gave my mother 15 because she had no really income, and except for Social Security. And at that time, my brother and I qualified for Social Security income since our father's death. So I think she got $150 a month out of that. So that was our income. We lived poor. And so I kept 3 of that 18, and Mom used her 18 to buy gasoline to drive from Bismarck to the trade school at Bonne Terre, and took LPN training, and then that was her career start. And so that's how we worked our way through that. Dad's insurance company, or settlement at his death, was $10,000. He worked the mines, and that paid off all of our debts. So we had no debt at that time, but we had living expenses. And so we made do. We got it. And then she got her LPN training, got the better job at Mineral Area Osteopathic, and retired from there many years later.
What other places have you worked? Kind of walk us through your work history, the places you've been.
The first year out of college, the mines took care of the miners' children, the deceased miners' children. And the first summer I was out of school, I was too young to work for anybody other than whatever. So I was a horseback riding counselor at Wiggins Camp, summer camp for kids in Lesterville.
Okay,
I spent my early years in Lesterville. My family's still in that area. And so I think in 7 weeks I spent 400 hours on horseback.
Wow.
And I had a little mare named Misty. I was leading the trail ride all the time and got along great with the kids. And they want me to get Misty drunk. So at my size, and Misty was a little bitty, all I'd have to do is weave in a saddle, and she'd just stagger all over the place, So Misty was drunk most of the ride. And then I also learned that the little bitty kids want the 16.5-hand horse, the tallest horse they could get on, the little bitty girls. And so you'd have to boost them up there, and that's where they wanted to be. So we'd have a string of 15 or 20 horses. The horses were inbred horses. I mean, they weren't very smart, but they were bred for that purpose. Very calm, very, very nice horses. And so what my problem was that in Lesterville, you have to cross a lot of creeks on your trail ride every day. So the horses get out there and they just plop in the water. So I have to lead out there and lead them out. But that was the only trouble I had with the horses. At the end of the summer, the owner came to me and he said, "You have had the only summer we've had with no injury of the kids on the horses. How'd you do that?" I said, "I just watched them walking the mares when they were coming into season. I'd pull them out of the string." And he said, "We never thought of that." So, the mares were tom, and it worked out fine. So we didn't have any injuries that summer. So. But after that, by the next second summer, I was able to go to work. But they were shutting down the Iron Mountain mine at that time, and then going to the Pilot Knob Pellet Company. So I went to Lloyd Erpenbach, the vice president of the Iron Mountain mine, and said, Lloyd, I need a summer job. And he said, I can't hire you now. I've got all my people laid off between these two mine transactions. He said, what I'm going to do, I'm going to send you to Granite City Steel, where our pellets will be going. I want you to learn up there how the pellets will be used. So I went up there and spent a summer living in Granite City, working at that factory, or that the blast furnace area. And I worked on the labor gang, and I loved it. I learned a lot about people, something about how to manage people.
Sure.
Watching the foreman up there. And that was a long summer living away from home. But then by the next summer, I was able to come back to Pilot Knob. They'd opened that up now and had their people back. And then I worked with them, and my job was to develop maintenance offices because I was working for the maintenance department in that mine. So I would go into, say, the surface maintenance shop, and I would set up a shop or an office there for their maintenance clerk. They had the foreman, and everything's in full operation, but they didn't have anybody keeping records to help the foreman and keeping maintenance records of the machinery. And this is before computer days, too.
Sure.
So I would go in and set that up, and then they would hire someone to fill in that job. I'd train that person, and then I'd move on to another job and set up another office, another part of the plant. So I got to learn the plant pretty well. And I was there when they would set up like a 27-foot diameter airfoil mill, a big ball grinding mill. It was 27 feet in diameter, had two, I think, 2,500 horse motors, one on either side of that, turning big gears and a big ring gear outside. And I learned later that when we bought that ring gear, they had not been careful about, it was made in Sweden. And they had not been careful about the money transfer and the denominations that they ordered that in. And it cost them an extra $1 million for that ring gear because of the money flow difference way they had to transfer that to get in the US dollars and into the Swedish dollars. So it was a mistake I learned there too. When you order international, you really have to watch your denominations of cash. But I would sit there, and a fellow named Charlie McHenry was the chief foreman there. And he and I spent many hours in the evening hours just waiting for him to start up, say, the airfoil mill or one of the other mills or whatever new equipment was going in. And we'd have to be there at the startup, but we didn't know when that was going to be. They were still bolting stuff down together. So I had a lot of time to talk to Charlie. And it turns out he was a survivor for the U.S. Indianapolis that sank after World War II, if you remember that story. A Japanese submarine sank them, and nobody missed them because the war was over by a couple of days. And they were days late getting back to port, and nobody picked up on that.
I thought they were celebrating.
Yeah, and they had guys floating around in the ocean out there with sharks eating them.
Wow.
And Charlie told me that they would float in a big circle. They'd hold hands, float in a big circle, look over, and that guy was asleep, and he'd shake him a little bit, and he'd flip over or wave at him. No bottom half of him. The sharks had got him.
Oh, man.
So they'd push him back out of the circle, and they'd form a tighter circle. And he said finally a plane spotted them, and they rescued them. But they were down a lot of people because of the sharks.
Wow.
They had to live through that. So that was a story that, it's just good, interesting history picked up on. But anyway, Charlie and I would be there when they started up this equipment and learned a lot from Charlie. He was a mechanical engineer also. I was a student for that. And just very fascinating education for me.
Absolutely.
And I stayed with that. I worked basically every other semester because I'd run out of money. I'd call Lloyd and say, Lloyd, I'm out of money. He said, your office is still open. Come on in. So that's how I managed to do that. And it took me 6 years to get my 4-year degree, but that's all right.
That's okay.
And by the time I graduated, I had 2 years of experience of mechanical engineering work that none of my classmates had. So it worked out pretty well that way, too.
Absolutely. Let's talk about beekeeping. I know that's something you enjoy a lot. How did you get into that?
In 2010, I had a motorcycle wreck, and I was thrown off my motorcycle and landed on my back in the middle of a highway, and my back was broken. And I was bedfast for many months, and then, by the way, in that process, they came into the emergency room at Parkland, and the doctor held up my x-ray of my back, and he said, well, there's your broken back and there's your tumor. He found a cancerous tumor and me too. It's small at that stage, and they caught it small. So I had 9-hour surgery of repairing my back. I have 18 pieces of steel from here to here, and no T5. That's gone. I'm still able to function, but anyway, had good doctors. But they also, in that 9 hours, removed that tumor and got that all straightened out. So I was bedfast from all that surgery, and finally came out, and to get in the car we had, which is a small Camry, I had to go down, and then I had to get up to get out. So I told my wife that I needed a Bud Heights car. So we found a car that it turned out to be a Santa Fe that was just right for me to just slide in. She had to do all the driving. And we had that Camry we'd saved it, and I had a buddy that's wife really needed a car. The Camry's in good shape. So I gave him a lowball price, and he was kind of insulted by it.
Yeah.
I'm here.
Yep. You made it. You're not charged.
I made it. All right. I didn't know if that was the Vice Squad or what that was coming after us. Anyway, but I shot him a lowball price. Well, he was a beekeeper. And he was kind of insulted about that price. I said, tell you what, you throw in a couple of beehives and teach me how to beekeep, I'll sell you the car for that. And he said, okay, because he's always looking for new beekeepers. So, and now he's a state, the secretary of the State Beekeeping Association. He's moved up pretty well. But I got into that and loved it. And because of that cancer, I was nauseous a great deal. Because after my treatment, I was having to take treatment a lot then, and you'd spend days after your infusion just sicker than a dog. Christian, I prayed about that, and God said, go sting yourself. Well, as a beekeeper, I knew about apitherapy. For 4,000 years, people have been stinging themselves to relieve arthritis pain. Always pain. Well, I'm the first one in the literature, because of that prayer, answered prayer, that said that it also works for nausea. So I called a buddy of mine. Finally, you can't keep bees in the house. You can't do this in the wintertime. You can't travel with a bucket of bees. They won't let you on an airplane with a bucket of bees.
Isn't that strange?
Yeah, they won't do that. Especially now, because they may be infected with the virus. Anyway,
Yeah, true.
But so I called a buddy of mine that at the age of my kids had gone to high school with my son-in-law. And she is a compounder for medications. I said, Amanda, do you know anything about apitherapy? She said, yeah, it works, but it's very inconvenient. And I said, have you ever heard about transdermal? Have you ever thought about that? Well, she hung up on me. It turns out that transdermal was her pet project. She loved the idea of mixing transdermal medications. Because in the nursing homes that they served, so many people won't take pills.
Right.
Well, my mother-in-law was one of those examples. She wouldn't take a pill for anything. So every afternoon, two of the nurses came down and gave her an arm rub down. She just loved it. Well, they had gloves on. They were putting her medicine on. She didn't know that. And so that was how that's done a lot now. And because of Amanda's work with transdermal medications on that. So Amanda called me later, and she said, if you had told me this 2 weeks ago, we couldn't do this. Because now she worked for a pharmacy, and so everything had to be with prescription. So she said 2 weeks ago, there was no prescription for high weight materials. I can't think of the word right now. Molecular weight materials, because of venom is a very high molecular weight material. She said 2 weeks ago a patent was issued for that material. I think it's another one of those God's miracles.
Right.
So now the problem is, working for a pharmacy, I had to have a prescription for a bee sting.
A prescription
A
for
prescription
a
to
bee
get stung by a bee, because that's what she was making.
Okay.
A transdermal bee sting. So I had to go back to my oncologist, and I said, and by that time he was a friend, I said, I need a prescription for bee sting. He said, I don't know if that's legal. By the time I got home, he had already gotten checked with his lawyer or whoever.
Right.
And had written a prescription, sent it to my friend at the pharmacy. She called me and said, I've got your prescription. Apparently it's the first one in medical record to be prescribed a bee sting prescription. I think you've also hit that first.
Wow.
So anyway, so we got that. It was very expensive because she had to buy all this special stuff and the special venom and all that stuff. So, but we started working right away. And before we got the prescription, I had learned to keep the bees in the house.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, I did it in the basement. And you have a bucket of bees, and the house is a good temperature for them. And I did it in the basement to try to ward my wife's fury off
Yeah.
of me. That didn't always work, but anyway, I tried.
Sometimes, yeah.
I gave it a good effort,
Absolutely.
a manly size effort. But one of my problems was I had a cover on it. It was solid aluminum, and you couldn't see through it. So I didn't know where the bees were when I slid that back. Well, 3 of them always get out before I slide it back. Well, finally, I was up in the kitchen one day, and she was frying hamburger or something, and she had a spider shield on top of her skillet. I looked at
That's the ticket.
So within a day, she had missed her spider shield, wondered where that was, and I had to go buy her a new spider shield.
Yeah.
But that solved my problem on where the bees are in the bucket.
Right.
So I'd reach in there, a pair of tweezers, and sock myself with a bee and all that. Kill the bee, because the bee always kills itself after one sting.
Right.
But got it solved that way. But Vice Squad's back.
Yeah, bicycles. You're still not tardy, though.
Not,
You're right on time.
not tardy,
Yeah.
okay. Well, anyway, but got that solved. But still, you can't use bees in the wintertime. You can't open a hive and get another 100 bees, sweep them into your bucket. And so by that time, she had developed this cream of her own. She'd made a mixture. There was no chemicals involved. That prescription was highly chemical material. So we have a very calm medication purpose for that. And we mixed in our own venom. Now at first I was developed a way to, with help, I developed a way to collect my own bee venom. And a bee doesn't leave much venom per sting. But if you get 20,000 of them stinging, they leave quite a bit of venom. So how I did that was electrified a piece of glass. And so when the bee stings that glass, the barbed stinger doesn't go into the glass, it just lays on top of it and deposits its venom.
Okay.
She also puts out a pheromone that tells her 20,000 best friends inside the hive to come out, I need you to help sting this thing. Now, why she stung it was because we had a very light wire mesh just above the glass, fired by 2 AA batteries. Very low voltage, but enough to make her angry.
Right.
So after the first one was angry, a few of them more got stung, but they were piled up on top of each other by that time. And so not all of them got stung, but they all had the sense that they needed to sting. And wasn't killing bees, and we think that they were more invigorated for their pollination and bee collecting because they had that fun of stinging that and didn't die from it. So we think that really invigorated the bees. But after 15 or 20 minutes of watching this horde of bees on that glass, I would walk in fully suited with my smoker and smoke them off and collect that glass and then go back to the barn. I have to do it inside because that venom is very powdery when it's processed. And any wind would all blow it off. So I had to take it into my shop in the barn and do this. Process it, get rid of the liquids, and then the dry part is about 45 to 55% melatonin, which is the part we wanted, the active part of the venom. And then we mix that, and it's still a very low quantity, but it takes a very low quantity in the bee cream to do this. Now our business is going very well. We sell a lot of it. So we have to buy venom all around the globe to catch the right season for production of venom. So in the wintertime, we buy from South America. And different ways of doing that. So that's what we've learned to do.
Wow.
Another point is all those years of being bee stung, I developed an allergy to live bee sting. I can't be around the live bee anymore. So I sold all my bees to my old order Mennonites that live just a half mile behind me. The bees still come and visit, but I don't have to open the hives, and that's when you get stung. And I go buy their venom.
Bees now, right? They just come visit.
So I go buy their venom or honey back from them. But and I have not, and I use bee cream all the time. And there's no issue with that because we believe that all the shock treatment, the anaphylactic shock, comes from the proteins that are in the venom, and that's the liquid that I dry away when I process the venom. So we actually are pretty sure we're removing all of that material that causes shock, and I haven't had any reaction. I don't know of anyone that has had. Now we tell people to be careful, because we don't know that it's all caused by that. And in case anybody's keeping notice, phospholipase A2 is that particular venom. I know that you were going to ask that.
That was my next question.
Yeah,
you answered it for me. Thank you very much.
Phospholipase A2, if you want to write that down.
You are very big into going door to door when you have a contested election? I know I've seen you a couple of times knock on my door.
Yep.
What's the strangest thing that has happened to you while you've been out campaigning?
A radio announcer with 4 or 5 kids in the house talking to me. Yeah, through a screen door.
Very strange, wasn't it?
Yeah. Well, I had I'm listed as Republican, and I stopped at a house on 00 Highway, and the guy came to the door, and we had a wonderful conversation. Just wonderful. I mean, it was just very pleasant. Handed him a card, and he looked at it and said, "Pardon, you're a Republican?" I said, "Yeah." He said, hand me my card back. He said, "I've never voted for Republican in my life." I said, "Can I leave as a friend?" He said, "Yes, sir." Didn't get his vote, but I made a friend.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, and
Absolutely.
that kind of thing happens.
Yeah. How many people don't have their pants on? I know that's...
I've never run into that.
Yeah, okay.
I'm old and I don't notice.
You don't notice? Yeah.
Right, yeah.
You're always focusing, from the neck up, so very good. What is something in St. Francis County that you're really proud of?
Our new buildings and our new facility, and the fact that we don't have any debt at all anymore in the county. We're totally debt-free. We had debt when I've been in office now. This is my 6th or 7th year, and we had debt then. But I'm an engineer, and engineers don't like debt. Now, previously we were politicians in schools, and those people like debt. The schools have to have debt, and that's a habit that's built into them, and so paying off a debt was unheard of to them early, paying off early. And so we did that. We paid off everything early. We're completely out of debt, nothing. But yet we've acquired the Weber Road facility. We've acquired the new road and bridge facility out there, and $500,000 for that plus renovation. Got more renovation coming now on it, but it's a wonderful facility, and I'm proud of those things. We completely changed over the payroll system. Our payroll system was 100 years out of date. In 1913, they started withholding for income tax. We hadn't updated. I mean, we were withholding for the taxes, but we hadn't changed the system, and we were still paying up to the payday. We were just paying up to that date. There's no lag time, not a week to prepare all the paycheck. They were writing the paycheck on the last day of the payroll, and then handing out the checks that day as people left. And that was crazy. Now, another problem they had then, you were paid on the 15th and 30th typically of the month. Well, on the week before Christmas, they always paid on December the 23rd, and they paid through to the 30th, assuming everybody was going to get their hours in. Assuming that everybody's going to get their hours in that time. And that's what, a week and a half or more. And so, and then your next payday would be on January 15th. Now, that's a long time at that season of the year to not get a paycheck.
North County teachers have just experienced that because we went from June to yesterday without a paycheck.
Okay. Well, so now we pay every other Friday, and we have a week lag time.
Yeah.
Now the thing was that since you were always paid on the 15th beforehand, a lot of people got their car loans due on the 15th because they knew they would get a check that day.
Sure, right.
Well, now your checks may come in on the 12th, anywhere to that to the 18th, the second, every other Friday. So, and so that was an issue. And I started talking that up to people. I had some people with panicked looks in their eyes saying, what am I going to do? I don't know how to hold money from the 12th to the 15th. And if it comes 3 days later, I don't know what to do without that. So I called in a financial guy to give talks about budgeting and help them and so, we just did it during the hours. And this guy was a stockbroker, and to get him to promise me that he wasn't going to try to sell them stuff, I paid him $200 per lecture on that, just to make him promise that he wasn't going to try to sales pitch.
Okay.
And so I think that helped a lot of people and broke the ice a little bit. And now, after we've done this 2 or 3 years or more, I don't think anybody go back to the old system.
Right.
Once they got used to it.
Absolutely. Who would play you in a movie about the life of Harold Gallaher?
I had a guy come up to me the other day. I've grown a beard, and obviously.
Right. Okay. Yes, I see it.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Since I've grown a beard, and a guy walked up to me and he said, "You remind me of a movie star." Now I'm thinking Tom Cruise.
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah.
That's where my mind went.
Right.
He said, "I got a picture of this guy," and he pulled out, and it was a picture of Grandpa on The Walking Dead. I thought, you talk about a downer. Now this guy is really.
Oh man.
So anyway, who would play me? I'm thinking of the one I got right now. Jack Elam. Remember the one-eyed guy, crazy guy?
Oh, yeah.
That's Jack Elam. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the guy. I always liked him. Okay.
Last question for you.
Last question?
Yeah, last question.
I got to come with some more stories.
I know, right?
Yeah.
If you were a sophomore getting ready to become a junior and you were coming to UniTec, what program would you take?
Very good question. I've been around the trades and a lot of machinery. I own a lot of machinery, and I loved all of it. But the one skill I haven't picked up in my lifetime is HVAC. I know the process and the
Right.
system, but I don't know how to walk up to that unit and repair it.
Huh.
And I would love to learn HVAC because that's the one thing that I haven't gotten very comfortable with.
Well, we do offer night classes. We've hired an instructor.
Yep.
So, if you don't have enough going on in your schedule, maybe you could be one of our adult learners here in a couple weeks. Harold, I sure do appreciate your time. Thanks so much for coming today. This is a lot of fun.
Thank you.
All right. Harold Gallaher, Presiding Commissioner, St. Francis County, joining us here on the hot seat on the UniTec YouTube Digital Media channel. Please like and subscribe for more fun videos.
Can I add that I'm going to be running for re-election this next time?
Yes, absolutely. You heard it here first. Harold Gallaher's re-election bid starts right here.